Hi all, Toby here. Writing an artist statement is a tricky thing. It's something that I least enjoy about my job. Whenever I publish or whenever I put on an exhibition, it often asks me for a very short statement, a bio, and I hate writing it. And I've probably written lots and lots and lots and thrown many of them in the bin. And it's a challenge, but it is a challenge I want you to step up to because it's going to be really, really important for this digital folio or this website that you're going to use to support your commission. The value of doing this statement is that it clearly communicates what your practice is trying to do. Okay? It's a very clear, plain language statement. But it's also important to recognize that it should reflect your practice and your way of thinking and making. That's to say, it can be light-hearted if your practice is light-hearted. But alternatively, if you are deeply ensconced in research or social activity and social action, it might also be reflexive of that too. Just be certain that it is consistent. Okay, so if you put together a very, very serious and very, very research artist statement, but your work is, highly improvised, playful, colourful, you've got to be certain that it's reflecting that as well. The artist statement is used for a variety of different purposes: competitions, residencies, applications, but also promoting your own practice, often used in publications, for instance. Um, so it should focus on the consistent values in your practice rather than target specific briefs. Okay? This statement has to reflect your practice, not the project. It has to reflect those values that are common to every project you undertake, regardless of its medium, regardless of its purpose. What are those values that underpin your um, practice? Now, there are so many different ways to write an artist statement, and you can find some good resources online, and there's also some indifferent and unreliable resources online. We know this. So I'm just going to be using the advice that I've been given, and these are some of the things that I've picked up over the last 15 or so years of teaching in an art school. So just some general do's and don'ts. 150 words to 200 words. This is kind of 2 paragraphs, useful for, say, a header, a CV. Okay, so sometimes we might put a statement at the top of our CV before we get into the projects and the academic achievements. We might want to put a little statement in there. It not only is useful just in communicating your ethos and your values, but it also is a way of introducing us into how those projects and academic qualifications have articulated those values. Be sure to assert rather than suggest. So it's not about what you're aspiring to do, it's what you do, it's what you have done. So you say, I have, rather than I want to. I have expressed through numerous projects my concerns with so and so, rather than I want to. That's still aspirational and it's still suggestive. It's important that this is an assertive statement. Okay? Make sure to use your own language. That's your style, your way of speaking. Okay? Not somebody else's. If you get somebody else to write your artist statement, it's going to fail because they're going to be telling you how they have interpreted your words and your works. Okay? It's not yours. Okay? So although there'll be many, many services that might offer to write this for you, it's incredibly important that you take ownership of this. Aim for clarity, not complexity. Okay? In many cases, whether it be for residencies or public commissions and competitions, it will be the panel that assesses this will be made up of a mixture of experts and lay people. These are often stakeholders. In case of public commissions, these might be aldermen, councilmen, they might be school principals, they might be members of the public that are brought in order to ensure checks and balances. Okay? So whilst certainly some will be aware of particular art terminologies and particular art moments, okay, aim for the middle, aim for that clarity. Okay? Don't dumb it down, just aim for clarity, plain language. As I said, it should try to express values that are common to your practices. So we might say commitment to sustainable actions, if that's what you're concerned with, is far better than saying, I make sustainable assemblages, because you're restricting what people will expect of you. So, okay, you work in assemblage, all right? But what about drawing? What about media? What about all of these other things? What are those common values? It's not an easy question to answer. Okay? Some of you may be expressing them still very much through media and discipline. But what we're asking for you to do is to try to unpick those and what are some of those values that stay with you throughout the project. I've just selected a couple of examples. They're very, very different. One's more light-hearted, one's a little bit more serious. Look at some of the good things, but also follow some of the top tips as well. Here's example number 1. Many people take great comfort in bathroom towels being the same colour as the soap, toilet paper and tiles. It means that there is a connection between them and an environment of order. Home is a place not only of comfort but of control. Okay? This artist statement is really kind of straightforward, using plain language. It's referring to everyday experiences that we can probably all relate to, and if we can't relate to them, we know somebody who can. So it starts by telling a story, okay? And I think that's a really interesting way to start an artist statement, okay? We live in times when climate change, we live in times when traffic, we live in times when culture, okay? These are things that can be quite useful because it gives us something to tag on your practice too. It gives us a sense of the contemporary. It gives us also a sense of, oh, I can relate to this. It tells a story. What I like about this statement is it expresses values as well. The sense of order, in whatever form it takes, acts as a shield against the unpredictability and lurking chaos of the outside world. Okay? My work is an examination of the different forms this shield takes and my thinking that lies behind it. In 2 sentences there, they articulated their practice. They're concerned with that reassurance, they're concerned with resilience, they're concerned with shields, they're concerned with the barriers and the protective measures that we undertake in everyday life. Okay? It goes on. I use domestic objects as the common denominator of our personal environment. Okay? What they're expressing here are processes, not materials. Those processes, for instance, are the application and the use of domestic objects. But it doesn't say, and then I paint them, and then I organise them, or then I assemble them. Okay? That might be determined as much by the project as anything else. So I get a clear sense of a story. I get a sense of what's important to this artist, but I also get a sense of what their processes are. Okay, this is a little bit more serious. It's a little bit longer. And you can see that the language has shifted quite a bit. It's less playful, it's less everyday. It's much more about research and processes and practices. But it's still strong and it's still effective. What I like about this statement is they tell us what they've already done. Okay? Having engaged subjects as diverse as the civil rights movement, southern rock music and modernist architecture, my work reproduces familiar visual signs. So they tell us what they've done. It's assertive. It's not my work hopes to do this, my work will do this. It's my work does, has always. But they're also telling us again, they're telling us about practice, not focusing on particular projects. Although there may not always be material similarities between the different projects, they are linked by recurring formal concerns and through the subject matter. Fantastic. I know this artist, they're a very well established, globally significant artist. I'm not going to give you their name, But if you would look at their work, you'd say, yes, they're varied. Every single project looks slightly different, but there's also something that binds them. And that's what this statement is about. There's some good things and maybe some bad things in this. Tell us what they've achieved. Tell us what you've achieved. Not what you hope to achieve. It's assertive. It tells a story, but in this case it tells a story of research. It tries to draw out consistencies in its processes, always tricky, but always important when your work is varied in its subject matter or form, material and process. It is serious, okay? Is it too much so? Well, this is a very well established, globally significant artist who's using these artist statements to apply for major global residencies, etc. So a kind of seriousness is probably expected in those situations. Here's a top tip. Make sure the language of your statement reflects the nature of your working. So if your practice is playful, so your language should be. If it's serious, as this is, so is the language. Okay? Nothing irritates us more when we're looking at proposals and looking at projects as when we see a work that seems to be inconsistent with what you're telling us the work is. If it looks playful, improvised, colourful, if it looks collaborative, and then the artist's statement is highly researched, highly serious, we go, there seems to be a disjuncture here between what the artist is saying the work is about and what we're actually seeing. But if your work is researched, if your work is concerned with social action, social justice, if it's concerned with researching particular processes and materials, articulate that. Just some general conclusions then. There are so many different ways to write an artist statement, and there are lots of good, bad, and questionable advice online, okay? You should treat all online resources with a degree of caution, okay? But there's still some good resources out there, and indeed some of this research today is based around that. Many artists will maintain statements of different lengths that can be used for different purposes. Many artists that I know, and I've practiced this myself, will maintain a common set of foundations. 4 or 5 sentences or 2 paragraphs that outline a very, very simple, straightforward, plain language. This is who I am. This is what I'm concerned with. You might then leave space for something that's a little bit more bespoke and offer an opportunity then to expand. Okay? For a major residency, they might ask for a longer statement. But by having these values in place, we can then expand upon them, give more specific examples, draw out some of the language. Okay. Now, there are further resources available on the Milo, and of particular use, I think, is the Sawtooth Guide that I've put in the folio support. I've chosen this one in particular because it speaks of what some of the local ecologies will ask for. Okay? A highly experienced Tasmanian artist who has won residencies, awards, exhibitions, etc. So their awareness of that local ecology is really, really important. Not an easy thing that we're doing, but hopefully this little PowerPoint will help us go some of the way. Take care now. Good about it. I think it's written in an accessible language. And I think it tells a story. I think we get a sense of what the artist is trying to communicate without restricting them to medium or material, which might put them out of the running for particular commissions or particular competitions because they've specified, I work entirely in paint. Okay? It's brief. Is it too brief? At 121 words, it's towards the shorter end of things. Okay? So here's a tip. And this is something that I use myself. And you'll see evidence of this in some of the artists that we've called upon to give presentations this semester. For a commission or a residency, you might want to leave space for a concluding paragraph that is more bespoke. Okay? Not necessarily applicable or appropriate for this particular task ahead, but this is just a general top tip. You might have a foundation of 2 paragraphs, and then you might leave a 3rd paragraph, which is targeted more specifically. Okay? We're not interested so much in that today. We're interested in more in the foundations and the values. The second is a little bit more serious. I'm not going to read it out in its entirety, but hopefully I'll give you a chance to read through it.